So when we say, everything is essentially marketing, it might be good to give kind of like terms and guidelines around specific types of functions, right? So marketing is really around driving awareness and demand in the most traditional sense. Then we have marketing operations, which is campaigns being executed using tools and data.
You're correct. Like that's exactly what marketing operations does. But marketing is what's driving the awareness. So there's a strategy, right? There's a strategy involved from a business perspective. Marketing operations is taking that and aligning it with how do we approach it systematically, right? So just know, once again, it's all encompassing, right? It's not, is marketing operations doing marketing? We are. Like technically they are. Marketing operations is doing a form of translation of what the awareness, demand, and messaging is from a business perspective. And now how do we execute on it? Sorry, continue. I know you had one more
Well,
on
no,
that.
no, absolutely. I mean, that hit the nail on the head. And then when we look at defining the roles, the next kind of question is, well, what's revenue operations? How does that feed into this overall sort of hierarchy?
Yeah, and it's revenue operations we've talked about before is sales, customer success, adding in marketing operations, right? We're not doing marketing. We're not, as a RevOps person, we talked about this in the last episode, from a leadership standpoint, we're looking at areas of improvement across all of these things, right? And that's the key thing is like when we talk about is marketing operations marketing, the answer is realistically no, it's not. It's a form of a role that is defining and helping another role that is could or potentially be marketing. It could be sales. It could be any other kind of component to it.
So since we have kind of defined what the roles of these different categories kind of fall into, I think it's important to kind of talk about the goals of each function: marketing, marketing ops, and then revenue ops. So maybe we dive into a little bit of that as well. What are the goals for each one of these different roles or teams?
Marketing itself is less tactical, right? That's where you have to focus on growth, and you have to focus on growth through what every single marketing operations person absolutely hates, the word strategy, right? There is strategic initiatives. There's alignment of business goals. There's, when we think about what drives marketing, what drives it is the macro environment, the world of the product, service, or whatever it is being offered, right? There's a strategy to that. There's an understanding that you have to have of what are the board members. If your company has board members, what are their goals, right? Generally, it's obviously revenue. What are the company goals? How do you align those company goals to the vision of the product and or service? So that's what marketing does. It tries to take, hey, we know that we want to be a profitable company. But how do we sell a product and how do we convey that message, whether it's through creative means, whether it's through strategic initiatives? And when I say strategic initiatives, I really mean the branding of the product, maybe the packaging of a product, maybe the services, the reasoning behind the services, the reasoning behind why the company is promoting this. Like, why should people choose G&W? Why should people use X company, right? And we did that with the plausibility curve. That's marketing. Marketing operations is the prioritization of how do we now convey that messaging to everyone, through what mediums, through what channels. A part of that, we're going to dissect in the operational world how to properly take those initiatives and make them tactical, right? Like, how do we, what is the count in YouTube versus LinkedIn, right? Like we released the plausibility curve, which is the G&W difference. And we did it across different channels, different mediums. We did it via email, but the strategy is, this is what we were trying to solve. And then revenue operations, when it comes into the mix, it prioritizes all of those items. And it looks at, is the process of taking the strategy, tactically executing it, now is there's a sales movement behind it? Did we generate revenue from it? And if we did, how do we optimize that entire file? The reason I'm leaving sales out of this conversation, just mainly because the sales, it is a difficult job. However, it's the one with the most clear and concise baseline goals and metrics, right? Sell stuff and close opportunities, right? And that's the reason, I mean, and don't get me wrong, like this, RevOps is part of that. It's part of understanding, is the sales movement, is the sales initiative being affected or hindered by all of these things? But the job, role, and duties and responsibilities of sales is ultimately generally the same, right? Like you have to close deals, you have to sell opportunities. So
Yeah, well, and that's the thing with marketing too. There's so many areas that kind of overlap, so it's very easy for people to say, "Well, everything is marketing," because there is so much overlap across these different areas. So, what is the overlap that exists? And we could leave out sales for a second, but there is overlap, like you mentioned. What's the overlap of marketing ops with marketing with RevOps and marketing as well? Like, what are those different, I guess, areas where more than one thing can be true?
So the main distinction of this is that, and I'm going to talk about it at a higher level first, is that marketing operations enables marketing, right? You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you cannot tactically execute on that strategy, no one's going to know about it. And I think the biggest point of contention and the biggest, I wouldn't say argument, but the point that people are trying to make is that somehow that equates to marketing by us taking, and trust me, I've been in a marketing operations person my entire life, right? And we take the strategy and we translate it to technology, right? We can dream about everything, we can think about anything, but how do we actually technically execute it? That's not marketing. That's a job role, and that's the overlap that a lot of people think, is that they're thinking that they're taking the strategy and making it executable, and that by it means is strategy, which is not, right? We're making it tactically executable, and that is it. The strategy was already defined, right? And then revenue operations, in the sense, it's supporting that entire front process, but also the sales and customer success. Like that's where collaboration versus ownership, I think, is a big crucial distinction between this conversation, is that you can collaborate on something, but you do not own it, right? And revenue operations is the fundamental belief of not owning anything except owning everything, right? And the same thing with marketing. Marketing is the ownership of that vision and that goal, where marketing operations ownership is to how to use what we have today to spread and translate that message so it's executable. And I think that's where a lot of people think that, oh, well, it is a strategy. There is a form of strategy that's involved, right? It's a skill set, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same function.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost kind of like, the marketing this is a beautiful prototype of selling the car. Marketing operations is how we're going to put it together and get it to market. Revenue operations is shipping, logistics, everything else that kind of goes into it from that standpoint. I mean, if you were to say
effectiveness, data.
Yeah. And if you were to say, here's the overlaps, here are the distinctions, what are some scenarios that we might be able to, I don't know, examples we could provide to say, okay, well, here's kind of where marketing ends, and here's where revenue operation comes in and bridges the gap between all these different areas?
Yeah, and once again, I don't think that there is a spot or a handoff. Like I do not believe in a handoff from one to the other. I think there's alignment across the board. And when we use terms in the modern day world of handoff, that is why these conversations pop up, is because they believe, or it sees that when something is handed off to me, now I own it, right? And the reality is I own a piece of it, and I own my expertise in it, right?
You're never handing it off. You're supporting it the entire time, essentially.
Correct, all the way from start to finish, right? And that right there is like the big big point of conversation that I always like to put in these, is that if you think of it as a handoff, then you are siloed in your thinking of, yes, you are doing the marketing strategy of it because now you've taken ownership, it belongs to you, right? But if we think of it in a RevOps world, in a revenue operations mindset from start to finish, and where RevOps comes into the place is to help the entire funnel, right? From start to finish. Like we're influencing all departments. And that's the same thing with marketing operations. We're influencing all departments. We're influencing sales conversations. We're influencing the strategy conversations because we're technically aligning what the strategy and the goal is into operational efficiencies. So that's why, I'm not a big fan of, handoffs were a thing. And I feel like maybe I'm the only one. I don't know. I'm not sure what's out there, but I don't, in the current state of the world, if we talk about true funnel management, there is no such thing as a handoff. There might be from a logistical perspective, but you're still supporting it, right? Like marketing is still involved with the sales funnel. Sales is still involved with the marketing funnel. I'm to an extent, I guess. And then marketing is really the strategic initiatives behind like the company, the brand, the engagement. Like how do we want to foresee ourselves? Like how do we want to project ourselves as a company? Like why is our product good? Why is our services good? And everything else is a support function of all of those as well, and vice versa. Like I'm not saying marketing operations doesn't support marketing. It does. It 100% does, because once again, how do you effectively go to market with it? And that's where operations comes into place.
So by that same token, could we rename this episode and title it and say, isn't everything just marketing operations? Isn't everything just revenue operations?
Yeah, technically you can. You can technically say is everything really sales? Because technically, if you send a marketing email and it has a product in it or a service or something that you're offering, it could be also a sales email, right? But sales function, and that's the big difference, is like the function of sales and the function of marketing operations, the function of marketing and the function of revenue operations are all holistically different. We're just supporting and enabling each other in part of those functions, but it doesn't make us that function.
Well, I mean, but maybe that's the best way to break down silos, is to say everything is everything. Everything is sales. Everything is RevOps. Everything is marketing.
Yeah, so everything is everything.
You can't say that you're not interested in it because it is marketing, it is sales, it is customer success.
I mean that's kind of true, right? Like if everything is not everything, and everyone is working towards the goal of revenue, and you don't hit your revenue goals, what happens? Right? Companies go under, people lose their jobs. There's a slew of things that occur. So, but that's what I mean, right? Like we could, like this entire conversation of is marketing operations, is revenue operations sales, is revenue operations marketing and sales. It's kind of a silly conversation because we're all part of the same team, and we're all part of a process that's enabling another job function to do their role. It doesn't make us that job function. It allows us to collaborate with them. It allows us to help them, and it allows us to, be just a team of people at a company, generally, right? But because everyone is responsible for the success of a company. Absolutely. So the entire point of the conversation of is someone this or someone that, I mean, you could technically apply that to your point of Conde to freaking everything. Technically, I could give my child, my 5-year-old could technically say ice cream is food. And he should be eating ice cream every single day. That is true. He's not wrong. Ice cream is for food, but there's nutrients, right? There's different things. So technically, like if you want to go down that rabbit hole, when my 5-year-old wants candy for dinner, it's food, it's digestible, it gets processed the same exact way. So I should really give him Kit Kats every single night. Yeah, which is never going to happen.
Is candy dinner? Maybe, but it is dessert. We know that, right? Yeah. And that's kind of the role. Like, is everything?
And how do you get dessert?
Yeah.
And how do you get dessert? You eat your dinner, you eat your vegetable, there you go. You get your dessert. That's it.
So maybe that's the answer. Is everything marketing? Maybe. But there are functions that do exist across marketing operations and revenue operations that are distinct to them, which has overlap, but are meaningful in the entire life cycle of a prospect or a customer. So when you think about, and maybe we'll end on this kind of thought, when you think about, okay, I'm in the marketing team, I'm in the marketing operations team, I'm in the revenue operations team, how should I align myself in the best possible way without overstepping, but being able to have that framework where like, okay, I get what you do. I own this part for the whole life cycle. Here's how I could support your part. What's the mindset that a RevOps leader or someone in RevOps or marketing ops should bring to the table to allow that seamless alignment, to allow that lack of opus? Like, what should they do?
I think, and this is just FYI, like 100% opinion, right? Like there's no data behind it because it's such a theoretical question that you really have to understand like the person that's in the role and what their responsibilities are. And ultimately, the way that I've always thought of this, no matter what, is that we are all part of one company with a end goal. Mm-hmm. And there's certain responsibilities that we have, but we are here to enable, especially as a technical person, right? We are here to enable other parts of the business so they can do everything more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at it through that lens, is saying like, hey, that's a cool strategy. It's not going to work because we can't tactically execute it. We have to change it a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, where that cross collaboration comes in a lot handy. But once again, it's a very biased opinion because that's just how I've always thought of it. I've always said, does sales need help with something? Let me see what I can help or how I can send that message or maybe help get more demos. There's a marketing strategy that is being passed down. How do we enable it? What do we do with it? What's the best way I could put this inside our system and execute it?
Yeah.
And that's, as soon as we understand those dynamics, then I think it just becomes a lot easier and we're not, spinning our wheels saying like, oh, the strategy, like why would we do this? Like, are we just doing like what is the best and the most efficient way to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's a great note to end on. And I think we answered the question. And I hope that, whoever's listening really took some great takeaways. We appreciate you guys tuning in for this one.
Please don't give your kids ice cream for dinner.
Do not give your kids ice cream for dinner. It is a food, but it's not one that you should consume. So with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day.